Welcome to the weightlifting comeback project. In this video, I'm going to go over the second phase of my training in making a comeback to Olympic weightlifting. My goal is to compete at Masters Worlds sometime in the future. And I've had low back pain pretty much my entire life. And about a year ago, that started to actually get better. So now I'm rebuilding all my motor patterns again from the ground up, making sure I'm doing things properly, so that way I can actually compete without pain. So the first phase, if you haven't seen that video, was super light and very slow and controlled. I didn't want to push weights up at all. I just wanted to focus on the contraction of the muscles and moving better and becoming more mobile. I was training twice a week and obviously keeping the intensity quite low. And now in phase 2, which has been about 6 weeks worth of time, I have upped that intensity all the way around. So I started to push the weights, so I only had a few reps in the tank. I maintained the same training variables, otherwise nice and slow, kind of 2 sets of 8, super slow and controlled, trying to get at least 3 seconds on the way down, and then kind of 1 or 2 on the way up, as opposed to just kind of blasting through the reps. That means if I'm doing kind of 1 arm at a time, which is what I mostly try to do, sets would take about a minute. And that's kind of what I wanted to have happen. For the squats and the deadlifts, I did it a bit differently. I did 3 sets of 5 instead of 2 sets of 8. I want to do pretty much the same amount of reps, the same amount of actual squats and deadlifts, but have slightly less fatigue over that period of time, so by breaking up and having a rest in between. Just try to keep the quality just a little bit higher, and I think because that was most important at these more sports specific lifts. So I also train 3 times a week instead of 2 times a week before, so I'm upping extra time per week now that I have that base built. I typically separate my workouts into 3 sections, the first one being the primary lift, so it'll be a squat or a deadlift. That's what it'll be I start my workouts with. So 1 day squat, next day deadlift, and squat, deadlift, back, continuing on. And then I have my primary accessories, which would be kind of the heavier exercises, the weights that I pushed a little bit more, typically being the upper body stuff, so like just the general presses and pulls, pull downs, kind of that kind of stuff. And then I have my secondary accessories after that. They're lighter weight, more movement pattern specific towards my target or trouble areas that I'm trying to help myself live and move better without pain. And I typically superset them, so the squats and deadlifts will be on their own, and then the accessories would be like kind of 1 push, 1 pull, or 2 kind of different areas, or like 2 ab exercises or something kind of similar to that. So let's get right into the exercises themselves. So first we're going to squats, and so on the left here is the squat from the first week, and then on the right is the squat from the last week of this 6-week block. What I want you to notice here is how my hips sink down on this left and how I kind of stopped it. So on the first kind of last phase, I was going a little bit deeper than I should have. You'll watch my butt kind of wink underneath, and I'll lose kind of that position as I sink down. And I pause in the bottom here. So this bottom position is definitely a little bit deeper, but if you look at my back position, this kind of newer squat is definitely a little bit better. And as you can see, I'm going from 45 kilos, 50 kilos up to 60, so I did progress my weights throughout those 6 weeks. So if I press play, and then you'll see that it kind of loops out as I start to come up, whereas on the right here, it will be a bit more stationary. I get to that end range where I kind of feel my hips are at the end, and then I'll come up, as opposed to trying to compensate and sink down a little bit better. And I did notice that this made a huge difference in my hip mobility, or at least like the standing, how I felt when I stood up. All right, so here's all the other squats. So or not all of them, just a handful of them. You can see me really trying to stop at that end range of my hips. So this is kind of the first or second week I did that, hitting that range and then coming up, trying to limit that butt wink as much as I can. And this is closer to the end. Still a very comfortable position, and it feels really good. I did notice that after I switched to this type of squat, that my hips and my quads and my feet just felt way more connected in everyday life. So just walking and standing around, I was like, oh, this feels way better because I'm not compensating and using these other muscles that shouldn't be used to complete the squat. Okay, here's the deadlift. I have very similar issues with the deadlift. You can see that when I get to that end range, there's that little bit of a butt wink, and so I'm trying not to like drop the weight down and reset every time. I'm trying to keep it right where that end range is. And I definitely noticed it got a little bit better as the weeks went on, as the time goes chronologically this way. But it's definitely still there. Definitely still a challenge for me at that bottom zone. But I did notice that I do feel stronger in that on the bottom position. Before I could feel myself just like ripping my hips or back off the ground, and it was really quite compensating, but now it's quite a bit better. So this is just a different view. Same thing, you can kind of see the hips will dump down just a little bit. This one's a few weeks before this one. And yeah, I can definitely feel better. I feel like as long as I get my hands in the right spot, my back activated better. That was something I really needed to focus on, that my lats were engaged, and then all the other positions just got a little bit easier. So yeah, good progress on the squats and the deadlifts. So let's move on to the accessories. Okay, here we are. Here's kind of 3 pressing exercises. I like to try and press at, multiple different angles. So I have the flat press, the decline press, and then kind of just an overhead press. As you can see, I'm trying to do one arm at a time, coming down nice and slow to about a 3 count. I count to 5 in my head, but knowing that that's going to be about 3 seconds, and then coming back up. I like holding up top because it just activates my chest and the tricep and the scapula at that area while coming down, and then it also increases the time under tension, so it gets to that full minute of activity. And then the decline press does feel really good on my chest because I'm usually so forward rounded that any of the kind of flat benches just gets the clavicular area, so I get really tight up here. Whereas if I'm pushing decline, it's more of this lower belly that seems to do a little bit more. So I have noticed that my chest muscles are definitely way bigger. I noticed when I was a kid, I was like, why is my chest so small? Like, I feel like I have a really underdeveloped chest. And now in the last 6 weeks, I've definitely noticed some hypertrophy improvements in that area. Okay, next, just a couple rows. Same deal. It's hard to hold 2 hands and do alternating, especially because my gym doesn't really have 2 cables, so it's always one at a time, saving with a dumbbell. So these are just nice and slow, controlled. Again, 5 count, 3 seconds down, squeezing on the way up, and really trying to activate that lat as much as I can. Trying to do multiple angles, so you got the horizontal pull and the overhead pull. Yeah, I'm just trying to push them until I have maybe 1 or 2 reps in the tank at the end of the second set. And so yeah, those are the single arm. I also added some double arm in this phase because I figured that would add a little bit more strength. And I really like this MAG grip, maximum aggression grip or something. Whatever these attachments are, they're fantastic. And so if you can tell here, as I get to the top of this motion, there's still a little bit of disconnect in my scapula right at that end range, so I was really trying to focus on that. And then on this horizontal row, you can tell that I am actually leaning forward. I found that works so much better at activating my lats than if I'm kind of leaning back or you're trying to row. If you just hold that forward lean position, you get so much better activation, so I really recommend trying that. If you have some activation, you don't feel your back activate, just lean forward and hold that position. Okay, into the secondary accessories that target more of my weak points. So this one is something that I did every week pretty much. So this is a superset. So I noticed that whenever I reach overhead, I typically extend my low back first and then my neck, so I'm not moving with the scapula. So I figured this would be a good one to really emphasize that scapular movement and trying to hold my pelvis in place and not extend at the low back, and it did fantastic for that. And then trying to come down slowly. And then this one here is the opposite motion, so instead of coming up, it's coming down, so it's doing the chest fibers instead of the kind of scapular mid-back kind of low and mid traps and kind of serratus. So, but again, both angles of the same movement to really activate the muscles all around that area. And then next, some other kind of scapular exercises. I think I had this kind of row, kind of rear delt row in the previous video, but it's something that I really like to do, and it feels quite great, and it's kind of opens up your T-spine, gets that rear delt going, and it's just a nice, easy, controlled row. Can't use that heavy weights though compared to your normal row, but it is fantastic. And then on this side is a kind of adduction. Something that I'm really weak in is adducting my arm to my head. And so it's kind of like a bicep exercise, that long head of the bicep to try and push it up and then also rotate the scapula up in those weak positions. Next was some hip accessory. This one I found was really helpful for my hips because I don't really have full hip extension. Like I can't get to that 180 degrees without extending at my low back. So this is something that I just put a kettlebell on my foot and then I would extend my legs out nice and slow and controlled, lock out my quad and then come back. So it just really trains that hip flexor in that lengthened position, and then makes it feel like it is safe there and it can actually hold that mobility. And then yeah, it just feels really great. So after I finish it, I stand up and I'm like, ooh, I'm nice and springy. This is something that I really need to do a little bit more of. And then here's some kind of spinal accessories. So just a classic, back extension on the GHD, nice and slow down, squeezing the glutes and trying to feel the back kind of roll up a little bit and really feel the erectors work. And then on the right side here is some neck work. I find that like with my neck being really tight and forward, doing some contractions in different areas really helps with it. So I did kind of an anterior and a posterior pull with a band, and you're just kind of moving around and trying to do, I set a timer for a minute, so I'm doing this for a minute on each side. And so it's side, rotation, up, down, whatever I feel, just trying to get that time under tension and get the neck to feel, again, also feel like it's safe and comfortable and can contract in different areas, so it doesn't need to just absolutely lock down and restrict movement at all costs. On that same kind of idea of being strong in weak positions, I did these end range holds. So these are the positions that I'm really kind of weak in or not very mobile in. One, that hip position, so that same kind of dead bug, foot out position I was doing before. Doing holds there, doing it in a chest fly because my chest is really tight, so just trying to hold there for a minute, and then obviously the bottom of my squat. So doing this in a leg press and just holding that for a full minute. And you definitely notice that as long as you are maintaining, you're trying to hold good positions, this does really well and absolutely accomplishes the goal. It's something that I'm going to keep doing and implementing in phases in the future. So that is what I have been doing for the last 6 weeks. As far as results goes, I've noticed an incredible improvement in my standing T-spine position. So I'm obviously pretty kyphotic, and that was probably one of the reasons that contributed to my back pain. And over the last 6 weeks, my posture has greatly improved. So it's also the same 6 weeks that I've been doing mobility work on my lats every day. You can see my last week's video, the mobility project about my lats, where I talk a little bit more about that. So I assume both these factors of training and that lat mobility have contributed to these benefits. So it's both the effective training and the targeted mobility work, obviously. As far as my back pain goes, this has been the best stretch of my life. The amount of days that I woke up and thought, ooh, back's a little bit tight today, was maybe once or twice. It's such a great improvement. I did notice that there is some different soreness or stiffness. It's a little bit higher up my back, so kind of lower up the lumbar region, as opposed to the area that it was before, which was in kind of the sacral, like really low. And I noticed that it wasn't the same kind of neurological tightness and pain. It was more just DOMS. Like I felt like I was just a little bit sore. So that signals to me that it's a rebalancing of the spine as opposed to kind of chronic tightness that's leading to unresolvable pain. So 100% progress. Really happy that I am making this progress and things are changing. And so yeah, visually I can tell that my T-spine is less rounded. Same as the lumbar spine, so I can tell. I look at the mirror sideways and I'm like, oh yeah, that's so much better, and I can feel it and I can see it. So that's great results. Chiropractor even said she noticed that I'm standing more upright too, so that's awesome. Another visual thing is that I've put on about 4 kilos of weight, so around 10 pounds. Not even trying. I was around 74 kilos before, and now I'm around 78. My goal was not necessarily to gain weight, but obviously that's kind of something that happens when you start training. I'm eating fairly carnivorously to satiety. I'm not trying to slam food in to put on mass, but just if it happens, it happens. And a couple people in the gym have noticed and say, hey, you put on some weight. I'm like, have I? I guess so. Thanks. So overall, quite happy with this style of training. It provides great results. I'm really happy with the 2 sets, the 3 times a week. Gives my body lots of time to rest and recover, as I am getting a little bit older now, turning 33 in a few months. So yeah, both the practical and the visual. Not that I really care about the visual, but the practical results are absolutely fantastic. Moving forward, it's going to be a bit tough for me. I got a contract building a couple houses until the end of summer, so the next 4 months I'm going to be working 12-hour days, potentially 6 days a week. And that starts pretty much tomorrow, I think. Assuming everything goes well. And yeah, so I'm unsure of the time and energy I'm going to have to actually dive into training, but I'm hoping I can still get 1 day in a week, try to film what I can, but I can't commit to anything right now. That being said, I am interested in seeing how these new movement patterns maintain over the long days and weeks of labor, so it'll be a good test of what I've done and seeing how it actually holds. So after the contract is up though, I'll absolutely get back to training. I still have my goals. I still want to squat 400. I still want to deadlift 5. I do want to compete in Masters Worlds. But sometimes life's got to take a quick detour to make some money. So that is what's happening. But not sure when my next training update will be, but it will be eventually. So I hope you're able to pull something useful out of this video. I like documenting my training. I think it's super fun. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.